You can do weddings on June now. You make weddings now, I'm stopping you. Can't make a wedding out of you.
The police.
I like going we made gatherings outside. I thought the cops would be all over the place.
No, they can't. I think they've already stopped going around knocking on doors and taking people. I was laughing when I got a ticket. The last person I know that got a ticket was Ed.
It was him.
Sana.
Moishi,
And band. Go on.
not sure what's happening. Why it's gone very small. I put it onto YouTube.
Must be too many people trying to get off.
No. That's because you're not. We're not on. Really close that.
No, you just went into baby mode. Are we on YouTube and you
Yeah, we are on YouTube.
Hello everyone. Is anyone there today?
No, not yet. No, there isn't. We're on YouTube. We're actually live now. Do you realize?
COVID's a scam.
Now we're going to get censored off YouTube. We have to have a welcome back speech.
Yes, we're up to Chav Zayin with Beis 2 lines from the bottom. I want to say one ha'ah, and you have to take it what's called an evit be'ravon mukbal. Ravon mukbal is when you take something with limited guarantee, limited insurance. Sometimes you can buy something, you can buy a property with such a thing. So what I'm saying now is with a limited responsibility, meaning that you should check it up to see if I'm right, and if I'm right, accept it. If I'm wrong, don't. Everybody's got signs up that we all know about the Meron disaster, and we must learn better and daven better because of it. Now, the truth of the matter is that if they put a picture in the papers of all the babies born last week, it wouldn't have been enough 45. Baruch Hashem and the Funky Hill around the world, hundreds and hundreds were born. And if we were to add there all the people that got married and all the wonderful simchas that were, and all the food that we ate, and the fact that we got, and the fact that every person gets, I think, 16 new breaths of air, Gemara says, Medrash says, you're supposed to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for every breath of air. It's Medrash. Every time you breathe, you should say a new praise to Hashem. Medrash says that's what you're mechuyev to do, because it's a new gift. So the truth of the matter is, I think that it is not the best way, not even the correct way perhaps, to only start serving Hashem better simply because there was a disaster. If I was to slap somebody and then that way get that person to do better, he may listen to me better for a few days, but he's more likely to walk around with resentment. What do you say? Techiro. He's not even techiro. Maybe. Much more, Springer speaks about this a very, very lot, that a person should spend all his time thinking how much gratitude he owes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Arosh also talks about it. I know people think, but Imamish, the idea once mentioned is the more you thank Hashem, the more the more Kilei Chasto. So a person should say, we want to chizuk, we want to talk during the Shiur, we don't want to get busy with our phones during the Shiur. Why? Because of the fact that in the past minute, we've all had 16 gifts from Hashem. I think it's average, you breathe 16 times a minute. And the fact that Baruch Hashem, we've all had food for breakfast, for dinner, for supper, Baruch Hashem, we're all healthy, Baruch Hashem, we've got hearts pumping, etc. And that itself should give us a huge akaras hatov to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But this is every person has to work individually, what works best for them. Some people, in my opinion, is chazak in v'nadul lechaveiro, some people in the mobiles. Every person is not really anybody. I find that nowadays we don't live in a generation. You can put this. Everybody live in a generation. We can put in a generation where our ikar avoida is to look for ourselves, for ways to chazak ourselves. Which each person has to look for ways to grow. That's our job. They should be from a feeling of gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay. From here to basically the end of the perek, the truth of the matter is, it's almost a repetition of yesterday's Omud. And wow, You see, it sounds gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It sounds gratitude to Hashem. Gratitude to Hashem. But really, it's a private enterprise. It's a gratitude to Hashem. Think about how many simchas there were. Okay. After the chef, he's allowed to choose whichever food they want. Everybody will be chasing after mine. The cost is £15. It's like valuable.
What the contacts on the
That's right, the contacts. Lemaisa. It's a matter of tremendous gratitude to Hashem. We have tremendous gratitude. And even people who struggle, have many things wrong. The avodah has to be to emphasize what is good. Obviously, those who suffer themselves, you have to be sympathetic. You don't go to a shiva house and talk about Hodel Hashem Kitov. But generally, that every individual has to be thinking about Hodel Hashem. Okay. Very, very, very briefly. Yesterday we learned from Rabbi Yochanan, just a summary in order to go weiter. Yesterday we learned from Rabbi Yochanan. What did we learn from Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yochanan said that Zor, what is a Zor? You know, it's very interesting. This week's parasha, the word Zor comes up very often in this week's parasha. Non-Kohen. Do you know how the Targum translates the word Zor? Chiloni. It's quite scary. That's the Targum. This week's if you do Shtai you'll see Zor Chiloni. Somebody, unfortunately, is not a Kohen. Somebody who's not a Kohen, and he goes up to the Mizbeach, and he sets up the fire. What did Rabbi Yochanan tell us? What happens to him is Chayv Misa. Rabbi Yochanan says, Chayv Misa. Can you imagine such a thing? Now, the Gemara asked the question, Zeh asked the question, he challenged it, because he said it's the Avodas Laila. It's the Avodah which is done at night. And the Avodah which is done at night, you're not Chayv Misa for. So eventually we explained Rabbi Yochanan did not mean literally to set up the fire, but rather he meant the Shnei Gzivei Eitzim to put the two logs of wood on. That means we had Rabbi Yochanan saying, if you set up the Barocha, Chayv Misa. Then we had Abzera challenging it, because it's Avodas Laila, it's Avodah in the night. And we had the conclusion that he didn't mean Siddur Marocha, he meant Shnei Gzivei Eitzim, the two logs of wood that comes afterwards. The next Gemara goes with the exact same pattern. We're going to have Rabbi Yochanan saying that Zod that set up the Marocha, we're going to just say that's not what he said, is Chayv Misa. The Abzera is going to ask a question, but this time it's not because it's Avodas Laila, but rather it's because it's Avodah She'eino Tamo. It's not a complete Avodah. And we're going to try back and forth and argue about it, and eventually we're going to retract and say Rabbi Yochanan never meant Siddur Marocha. What did he mean? Shnei Gzivei Eitzim. So it's actually a repetition of yesterday's Gemara with a slightly different nuance. Yesterday we were busy with the fact that it's Avodas Laila, that Siddur Marocha is an Avodah do at night. Now we're busy with the fact that it is not an Avodah Tama. What's not an Avodah Tama mean? It's not a finished Avodah. You still have what to do left. So let's go inside. Basket for Abzera. So Abzera asked Rabbi Yochanan, how can you say that setting up the fire on the Mizbeach, this is the Baruch Yechai Misa, how can it be? It's not an Avodah Tamo. In the end of the day, you're going to have to do more afterwards. Now, like it did yesterday, it challenges the question, and eventually the more agrees to the question, the more eventually retract. The first one challenges the question. The facts is something which is not the end of the Avodah, and Yechai Misa for. Says the Gemara, it is. Seif Avodah Dimomahi, it is the end of the job. Rashi, in fact, misses out this line, the next few lines, but Tosfos explains it, and basically explains like this. We would imagine putting the fats on the Mizbeach to be the end of the job. You're finished, you put it on the Mizbeach. Tosfos explains the more, and they haven't been understood, it's not the end of the job, because you still need to do Trumas Hadesha, which is to take the ashes. So you still have something left to do. And what the Gemara answers, no, it's not true. You've got nothing left to do. Why have you got nothing left to do? Because it's the end of the day job. That which you do to a Sadeshan is a whole new job. It's a beginning of the job. Think more about Tumas Sadeshan. And again, Tosfos explains that Tumas Sadeshan is not the end of the job. Now, does anybody want to guess why Tumas Sadeshan is not the end of the job? It's quite hard. Because it's Yitzhak Sadeshan. You've got Yitzhak Sadeshan. So it's not the end of the job. It says, well, no, it is. The way Tosfos explains is that is the beginning, and the Yitzhak Sadeshan you don't always do. The Mocha in the Circle Kaddish, don't need to wash hands again. You've started the new job, it's a whole new job, it's not, you don't need Yitzhak Sadeshan. So now that we've established that you have to actually finish a job to be Chayv Misa, so why for Yisroel Zor Chiloni? That's how the Targum says. Goes and puts on the Mizbeach and Marocha, why is he Chayv Misa? It's not the end of the job. Tamohi is the end of the job, putting the two logs. Mask for Rova, like we had yesterday. Elamata de boy pious. You should have to have its own separate raf for the shteik ziratim. Says Rav boy pious. Does it not? Of course it does. But Tana Mishazoch to a sadeshan. Yiskeb is zidu shteik ziratim. It is part of the lottery. You said that it's a special job. It's so does it chai misa. It requires a raffle. It's raffle. It does. What meant to ask if I sleep with the atzmo, let it be its own separate raffle. Why is the one who gets the two sadesh and get the shtik zireitzim? If shtik zireitzim is such an important job that if I was to do it at bichai misa, surely it should be important enough that a kohen should have his own separate raffle. Says more, no. Kedam, we know, like we said earlier. Does anybody remember what we said earlier? Oh, let's go through very briefly. What happened was in the beginning, people wouldn't get up for it because they would say to themselves, who says I'll get it if I do get it, I'll get to a sadeshan. So they made it more valuable to make it worth it. Remember, that only something which he saws chayim misa requires a raffle. That something which he saws not chayim misa does not require a raffle. By shchita he saws is allowed to do, and it's just part of the raffle. It's a new job, and therefore, even though indeed a soul is allowed to do it, the kohenim would raffle it off out of excitement. The Gemara. Remember that. Remember that the time of pious, that's something which is not complete avodah does not require raffle by where it is not avodah tamo. And nevertheless, it requires a pious, because one of the raffles was who would put the fat in his blech. And it's more so if I would do the mumma, like we said previously, it is the end of the job because the Tumas Sadeshan is a whole new job. Now, Tumas Sadeshan, why does it require raffle? We've got Tzara Sadeshan, and it's more Mishrumaisa Shahoya because of the story that was. It's the next issue we're going to do in a minute. The one appointed would say to them, and tell them to go up on the roof and to check if it's light. It doesn't say that you have to do it. It doesn't say shtik ziratim. Why not? Is a raya that for that you don't need warning. Is a raya that shtik ziratim can even be done at night. So therefore, sidrei vorim, that is the avodas yoim. It's a new job. The shtik ziratim is the end of the night. Says what loiktari. This is what says no. Hach less lota kantor, that which has got no solution, because if you shech the common time before it's morning, you would have to re-shecht it and start the whole process again. Ketani, we have to mention meaning we need to make sure that it's a light for the shecht in the common time, because if it's not light, you're going to be night and it's no good. But for the stage you can always redo it, just take away the wood and put it back. So for that, we're not so careful that it should be morning. We should be it many more times in this world, next world, and to get deeper and deeper clarity for it. And the Chofetz Chaim says that everything you learn in this world, Shmuel teaches, even if you forget it, Shmuel teaches the next one. We'll do the Chaim at the end. The Mamuna is the scan, God would say to them, go and see if it's time for shchita. So what they would do is they would climb onto the roof and they would look to see is a light. If it did, the one who saw it would say barkoi, meaning it has shined, it has lit up. If you ever read Haskamas, many of the Haskamas uses this expression. Havoya, one who reads the Sefer, Oimer says about the Sefer, barkoi, it's lit up the world. This is how many Shach used to use this expression. Havoya Oimer barkoi. One who says, but it's a bold expression. You stand in the roof and you say, I can see it's lit up. I was looking at the Ulash Sefer, it's got a huge arichas about a fascinating topic, which is a bit complicated. I wish I could understand it properly. Now it's like this. How many people went on the roof? One. Havoy, the one who sees. Now the problem is that Eid Echad is never believed. And Eid Echad is never believed. So how can we rely on one person saying that it's lit up? We should send two people onto the roof to check that it's lit up. Why not? If it's not light, and you check the Korban Tomit, then in fact, the Korban Tomit is possible. So then everything's no good. So you're relying on him that it's morning. He brings the Yerushalmi, asks the question. The Yerushalmi says that something which can be verified easily if he's lying or not, and they definitely believed. The problem is, Rashi says, in the Bavli, what? Oh, he brings many questions about this, many questions, which is very hard. So it's very interesting. For example, a woman has a baby on Friday afternoon. If it's on Friday, you can't do the bis on Friday. If it's Shabbos, do the bis on Shabbos. If it's between Friday and Shabbos, when do you do the bis? On Sunday, the following Sunday. Now, do you need to have Eidim or an Eid Echad is enough as to when the baby was born?
Eid Echad.
Levi, you say Eid Echad. Rashi discusses it. The Shaila is Mechatesa. Why should we believe?
It talks about whether the midwives believed, and it says
I
it is
know. The Shaila is, but why? Why are they believed? Alternatively, it talks about a Shaila when somebody dies, and you want to know, it's a shiva, a bad goes away, and what they to say is divorce. And many different proofs and discussions about this. The rule of the thumb is that Eid Echad is never on Beisurim only in two cases. You should just be aware. This is what Rashi passes. Eid Echad is never on Beisurim when it's biyodi, when it's in his hand, or when it's a derabbanon. So, for example, if you go to home tonight and your wife says, "I made you a meatballs and pasta," and you don't have to be worried that maybe cheese fell inside it and it's asa. Why not? Why don't you have to be choishish? Shach talks about it. No, not because chazak. It's Eid Echad never on Beisurim because it's biyoda. It's in her hand. She has the capability to make sure that it is kosher. Anything which is in your hand, a sheikhet, a moed is believed to say, I did it right, because it's in his hands to say so. Or if it's a shailin derabbanon. Says if you take those two conclusions to be true, in this Mishnah it's left as a question. Because in this Mishnah, it's not derabbanon. Shecht in the common Talmud would be absurd deraisa. And is it biyodoi? No, you can't make it morning. So it's neither biyodoi or not and it's a deraisa. So he says, evidently, when something is so easily checked up upon, that all they need to do is go up the stairs and look for themselves, that it's so mus davida gluye, even in Eid Echad is believed. And he says it comes out of baby chiddush, and he says, yeah, he asks it. That's Vaz's question.
It's not like you've got someone
Yeah, he asks it as a question. Why Taka did they only send one person up? He says big chiddush, and he says that's why Taka we can rely on a midwife, because of the fact that it is something which is so easily established. But he asks, what would be the case when nobody asked anybody for 2-3 days, and then you go back to the hospital, and you say, oh, by the way, we were not sure when the baby's born, and then he gets into the whole company. I just said it's a very fascinating topic about Eid Echad Lemon Bisun, but he asks like why only one person? Why is it only use one person? So one who stood on the roof would say, it's the top. Masib and Shmuel Oima.
So if they just rely on them, you can see it from they want to make sure that it's not Rehona.
Oh, but the fact is, at Kedei Kach,
Just confirming that it's
again, you've got the same question. You're right. You're jumping the ball. But again, you've got the question. Maybe it is the. The whole eastern side sky is lit until Chevron. And he says yes. I think more describes exactly what they said and what the interchange was. Why did they need it? Once it happened, the moon came up. They thought that what? That it was that Alois had come out. V'shochatus atomid, and realized it wasn't. They went and destroyed the common Talmud. Now, by the way, the was going to point out that couldn't have happened in Yom Kippur, because in Yom Kippur the moon never rises at that time of night. We'll discuss it when we get to the Gemara. But the Gemara over here, Mishnah's over here interchanging two separate points. That means on Yom Kippur we would send somebody on the rooftop to find out if it's morning, even though on Yom Kippur it wasn't necessary. But we did it every day of the year because sometimes it is possible for the moon to come up and you think it's the sun. Sometimes it can happen. But the Maisa on Yom Kippur, it couldn't possibly happen. And now that we had to do it some of the days of the year, we did it every day of the year. And now we're continuing going back to the Kohen Gadol. But this story of burning the Korban Tamid never happened in Yom Kippur, it happened on a different day. What do you say?
that's the reason some people pull up, not because they believe it, it's to make sure that
Right, but we only send one person up. We only sent one. The question is, why is one enough?
it's intuitively, not because whether they believe or not, just whether he's going to make the right decision.
Why? What do you mean one person? I got confused. Yeah. It seems that when you're standing on the roof, you're able to see clearly whether it's the sun or the moon. That's the idea, I suppose. So what this carries on now, Lechas Kim Kippur. Yehuda could go to Beis HaTfilah, go to Beis HaMikveh. Zeh HaKla, Hoyim HaMikdash. This is one Beis HaMikdash. Kla Mesech Esraglov. Anybody who go for the bathroom for number 2, which is used the expression Mesech Esraglov, covering his feet. The reason is, when a person goes for the bathroom for Gedolim, he has to crouch. While he's crouching, he's automatically covering his legs. So Ton Tevila, every time a Kohen would go to the bathroom for Gedolim, he would have to then go to Mikveh. If just person would just urinate, Ton Kiddush Adayim V'Raglayim, would have to wash his hands and feet. It's very interesting. I saw the Be'eri writes, why do you have to go to Mikveh after going to the bathroom? Now, before I saw the Be'eri, I thought it's an Indian of Kedusha. I was sure of it. The Be'eri says, because it's difficult to wipe yourself 100%, And before you know, there's a tiny bit left. So by going to mikveh, you make sure that you're clean. And I saw the Meiri. I was very disturbed. What? Oh, you do? That's right. And also, if you just dip in and out, in theory, it is possible that it doesn't help. But afterwards, I see that everybody says like even I was wrong. And for the Gemara, it's almost muchach like the Meiri. So I retract what I wanted to say. And no, just very interesting. It's nothing to do. I'm sorry, maybe it's to do with this as well. But the Meiri says it's simply a technical thing to make sure that you're clean. So if a person goes to the bathroom for number two, he has to go. Basically, he has to go for big.
Is it not something to do with the pressure that one puts to make with the gedolim that is maybe Zov's going to come out?
No, I thought that. I also wondered about that, but it's not. It's not that. You're right. And Zov, it does say something on those lines, but no, that's not pshat. But rather, it's to do with the fact that it might be a bit dirty, and therefore it needs to go to the. Says the Moch of Chesed with based off of the page. Tanya. Now we're going to have four different expressions. What did the person say when he would see the sunlight? And they're all very, very similar. But when Yokim says there's no argument, it's just different expressions that they would use. Others say that there was an argument over here. Each one is coming up with a slightly different time. So the morning has shone. It's lit up. It's not just lit up, it's even risen. It's even lit. Even it's even lit up. He would say, as it lit up all the way to Bechever. And people are starting to work. Oh, I just said that. Yokim said, when Yokim says literally exactly the same thing, just a different way of expressing it. Rashi is meduyuk, and the say that it's a slightly different time. Bible is the beginning of Alois. This is slightly later in Alois. It's all different levels of brightness in the sky. We know already, we're going to say it a few times, the Yerushalmi tells us, why did we mention Heaven? Why did you have to mention the light is lit up to Heaven? It's Chus of Ovis, Chus of Yaakov. So therefore, we will say, is it lit up to Heaven to remember this Chus of Ovis? Now, you'd say everybody's gone off to work. Obviously, again, we're not about Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur nobody's going to work. But rather what we mean is, on every day, this happened every single day. So therefore, he would say, it's lit up and people are going to work. It's very, very light. When people go to work, it's ready morning. And it's more, let's go Pradim Kalminon. More Bowman said describes, it's very interesting, because we don't have it so much nowadays, but if you read about what would happen is wake up in the morning, the people who had, let's say, harvest to take in, or something, they needed a job doing. What they would do is they'd get up very, very early and go to a place where the workers would then gather to then be employed. They'd say, will you come to work for me today? Will you come to work for me today? And how much do you want, etc. So the bosses would leave the home very, very early. Yes, I do. And that's what I was about to say. You have like these places now, it's so you see, they're coming through the borders, they stand there, and then you have these Israeli contractors, and then you have at 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody drilling outside your house. If you ever lived in Kiryat Sefer, they start working at 4 o'clock in the morning, literally. But what? Not sure, but they're all the hot. You have this one. But so we're not discussing when the workers have come. We're discussing when the people go to get the workers. Okay. Now, because we mentioned about the morning and we mentioned we're going to go to a slightly off topic about tefillas midcha when you should daven. Tzilusid Avom, the Tefillah of Avom, which is very, very strange because we talk about Mincha, and every little child in the school is told who was Mesak in Mincha. Yitzchak. This is Shonim asks the question. It gives two answers. So look at the bottom test. It says Yitzchak Tchid Mincha. So he says like this: after Yitzchak was Mesak in it, Avom took it on, and Avom was even more careful about it than Yitzchak. Can you imagine? Once Yitzchak took it on, alternatively, the Shonim says Avom of course davened Mincha. He did everything right. Only Yitzchak publicized it. Avom was the one that did it privately. Either way, we'll talk about Tfilas Mincha. So when should you start Mincha from? When the walls become dark. That means, if you imagine a very tall wall, at midday, there's no black on the wall. It's completely white, because what happens is the sunlight goes on it. By the time you go, let's say an hour later, so the sun's, let's say, gone to the west, so therefore it shines on the wall, and then what happens is you've got shadow. So once there's a blacking of a shadow on the wall, that's when you should daven mincha. By the way, the Mechaber says because of this Gemara, it's a mitzvah to daven mincha as early as possible. The minute that the walls, we don't keep it. And we should all discuss it at great length. But in Maisa, he brings this Gemara. You should
keep it where it works. As in, our day in this country is 9 to 5.
I,
If
I,
everyone would go out at 12:30 and have mincha, that would be law.
I know, Mr. Bo, I thought like that. Mr. Bo actually says that those who hold that forget that you should have mincha late. It's a shaila. It's this what you're saying is b'diavad. Shais were too busy to do it. But I tell you, it's the story. I was going to say, but very Lapian used to have mincha very early, and they once said to him, "There's a shit of Mr. Bo that you should do so." He says, "What can I do?" So after davening shachris, I can't wait from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the afternoon to daven. It burns by me too long, so I daven at 1:32, whenever it is. It's too long to wait. He says, like, imagine somebody would eat breakfast at 8 o'clock in the morning and not eat anything till 6 o'clock in the afternoon. It's hard. He says, I've got no choice. That's what Lapid said. It's a shine in the poskim. Okay, we'll leave it to God. Kitzah, from the minute that the sun makes a bit of darkness, that's what you should have. Fade the Gemara. Should we learn from Avam Avinu? Avam Avinu was very great. The first opportunity to have mincha he did. Are we going to try and copy Avam? So I said, what's your problem? Many times we learn from Avam. Tana Gamma Avam, we learn from Avam. But no, we nominate the Tanya. On the 8th day, you should do Mila. You could do Bismillah the entire day. Reason Makdimi in the mitzvahs. The pasuk says Avam got up early in the morning, so we learn from Avam Avinu Zizim Aktim the mitzvahs. If we learn Avam Zizim Aktim the mitzvahs, let's learn as well from Avam Avinu that you should have a mincha at the very earliest moment. And you can't say from Avam we should learn. Yes, we can. This is the kasha that Rabbi Yosef had. That's not a mishnah that we should be familiar with. Shabbos, Pesach is Shabbos when the big of a rush, because we want to roast the Korban Pesach before Shabbos comes in. Nishchat b'sheish mechza, you shech the korban tomid by 6.5 the korban sheba mechza. That means we all know mincha is connected, shach is connected tomid sheshacha. Mincha is connected tomid shvina abayim, and ma'av is for the fats that we bring on the mizbeach. So mincha correlates to the korban tomid of the afternoon. Now, when did we say ishtav mincha? A minute after chatzos, because a minute after chatzos, you've already got a bit of darkness on your wall. So, and the Mishnah says that when do you bring the tomid sheshacha? When's the first minute? After 6.5 hours, which is for days from 6 till 6, it's 12:30. That's the kasha. So the Gemara says, "My kasha." The Dilma, Rashi explains that if you go to the walls, you actually see it. The outer bricks are much wider than the upper bricks. If you've got a wall that goes a bit like that, so then what happens is like this: at midday, it takes a long time for it to be shadow on the wall. Because if it's like a thin strip, so straight away, the second you've got a shadow, but over here, it's a bit of a slant. So when the sun moves a little bit, it's still not making a black shadow on the wall, because the wall itself is actually got a bit of a slant. So you don't actually have blackness on the wall for another half an hour. Inami, another answer. Shani Avom Avinu was a great astrologer. Does anybody know a piece of astrology that Avom Avinu said?
Oh.
The stars. And Avram's not going to be able to have children.
Avraham Avinu will never have children. He saw that in the stars. It's something that Hashem had to change there from Avram to Avram. He sat in the yeshiva, and because he sat in the yeshiva, he was particularly wise. So again, the Gemara gives 3 answers to this question. Mincha, the Gemara says you should daven from the minute it starts getting dark, which is a minute after midday. Korban Tomid is only after 6.5 hours. The Gemara gives 3 answers, going backwards. Avram was very wise. Avram was a good astrologer, so he could see the sun moving a tiny bit. We can't. Alternatively, the walls of the Beis Hamikdash went like this, and therefore, since they were sloping inwards, therefore it took time for it to become dark. Lemaisa. If somebody would say to you, so when should I daven mincha? So the Mechaber Paskas only from Shesh Mechza, only from 6.5, because since the mincha, the mincha is connected to the Talmud Shosh Ben Arbaim, and we never been in Talmud Shosh Ben Arbaim earlier than 6.5, you can't make mincha either. Mishmor discusses the question, but what happens if a person davened mincha before that time? And it's a machlokes in the poskim if it's yoytze or not. Says Rabbi Yashiv at 12 o'clock. Let's say a person davens at 12 o'clock. Doesn't need to repeat mincha. What? At 6 to 60, yes. He davens at 12 o'clock, 12:01. Davens at 12:01, doesn't need to repeat mincha. It's machlokes in the poskim. Says Rabbi Yashiv, it depends on these answers of the Gemara. According to the first answer of the Gemara, that really everywhere we should daven at 12:01. The walls of Beis Hamikdash were strange. So for really, even the walls of Beis Hamikdash would daven bring the common Talmud. It's just there. If the problem is because Avraham Avinu was particularly wise, we don't have that wisdom, so then we can't daven, and therefore we need to repeat mincha. The Ma'aseh Mishmor says one should never daven mincha before, half an hour before. No,
If it's toned on the top, now we've not got the top anyway.
no, it's connected when the Talmud would have been
That's when
brought.
it was.
That was when it's fixed. So it's machlokes to the post you have to repeat. Okay. The Gemara says, "Abba b'chava b'chadida." It's very interesting. The Rambam paskins this in Hilchas Avodah Zarah, the following Gemara. The Gemara tells us that throughout history of Klal Yisrael, there was always a yeshiva. And many people discuss what's the most important institute that the yeshiva that the world has. Is it the Beis Din? Is it Chesed? Is it Yomi? Is it the Shiur? The answer is the most important institution that the world has is yeshiva. It's very interesting, yeshiva. It's a very hard thing. No, a place where a person does nothing but learn Torah. That's the Rambam. A place where a person does nothing but learn Torah. It's very interesting. That is what? It's a very interesting thing. Let's see the Gemara. The Gemara is a bit of a long Gemara, but it's easy Gemara. From our father's days, they never stopped having a yeshiva. Here the Gemara uses the word zikna. Every time the Gemara is going to find the word zokin. Zokin stands for zeh shekana chochma. So zokim, never we're going to find the word zikne all over the place. So it says in the Mitzrayim, go and gather zikne yisol. Hoyu bebit yeshiva mam. Shnema os for yeshiva ish mizikne yisol. Avam avinu zokin yeshiva yoshnema ba'avam zokin. Zeh shekana yeshiva ba'yomim. Yitzchak avinu zokin yeshiva yoshnema ba'yi ki zokin Yitzchak. Yaakov avinu zokin yeshiva yoshnema b'nei Yisrael kovdu mizoiket. Eliezer da'avam zokin yeshiva yoshnema v'im avam avdei zkan beisoy amish v'chol shaloi. Amabloza shemoisha b'Torah asvaboy. He ruled over the Torah of his Rabbi. Who Damascus Eliezer Mabaloza Shadur Damascus to also Shabu La'achevim. They taught the Torah of his Rabbi to others. Okay. So the Maisa, wherever they always had zakenim, always had people that sat and learned Torah. The Rambam writes that even the Yaakov Avinu before he died, the last thing he said to his children was, make sure that you always continue to keep the yeshiva going. Omarav, Kim Avam Avinu Kol HaTorah Kulo. Avam Avinu kept the entire Torah. Shenema. Listen to my voice. Maybe he listened to me. Was he kept the 7 mitzvahs? Says, well, that can't be. We know he kept the bismillah. Maybe he kept the 7 mitzvahs and bismillah. Why does it say my mitzvahs, my Torahs, plural, must be everything? He kept even Erev Tavshilin. That Torah means plural, both Torahs, Torah Shebechsav and Torah Shebal Peh. So here we have, you can't imagine how much Torah has been spoken. Rashi himself said that when he was a child, he used to speak to people about this question. What does it mean that Avraham Avinu Kadav Italia, he says by himself, Kadhavina Talia. Talia means a child. Now as a child, we used to discuss this question. What does it mean that Avraham Avinu kept the Ruvet Tavshin? Why? I mean, of all things to keep. So, Posh Pshat is, but there's many Dvabolas. Why did you keep the Chanukah, for example, or Megillah, or lighting the middle? Well, the Erev Tavshin also had yet happened. But why Erev Tavshin? Just, yeah, okay, obviously it's just an example. The question is, of all examples, why use that one? So I'll tell you a few more. So, Maritz Chil says already 2 explanations. One explanation is that many Takalos to Rabbanon or Xer for something. For example, you're not allowed to marry your great-grandmother. As a Xer, you might come to marry your grandmother, which is awesome in her too. So that is not such a chiddush of Avram Avinu kept. Why? Because that's logical, meaning that Avram Avinu could have worked it out in his own mind. Because it's Xer, like he's not touching Muktzah, is a Rabbanon, because it makes sense. If you start touching a pen, you might come to write. The Eruv Tavshilin is something which is beyond logic. It's a whole new Gezer, it's a whole new concept. If it's a whole new concept, so the Mechates Navavinu should keep it. That is one explanation. Yes. Another explanation is like this: that Akev, what does the word Akev literally mean? Very good, the heel, foot. And you're supposed to be curious about not Eruv Tavshilin, Eruv Tchumin. If you look at the side of the Gemara, Akev Hashem Avon Bekeli kept everything, including Eruv Tchumin. Akev, even the mitzvahs that exist with the foot, he kept. What's mitzvahs with the foot? Okay, no, the Pasha, that's 2,000 is not. Even the Eruv Tchumin, that's another translation. Rashi says that when he was a child, somebody came to Beis Shadash, the new pshat, that Eruv Tavshilin means the mixing of foods. Eruv means to mix, Tavshilin cooked foods. One of the things that we're very machmir about is that we don't eat meat and milk together. We don't mix foods, which is only Rabbanon, by the way. Now, if you look very carefully, says Rashi that he did. Why? He served the malachim. He didn't serve the meat and the milk straight away. He served bread in between. The Adzviz kept even mixed foods. Okay, he was a Yekish. He came from Holland. But the Beis, he kept a Ruve Tavshilin. Another pshat in Ruve Tavshilin. But there are many, many explanations to this. What does it mean? Avram Avinu kept even a Ruve Tavshilin. Why of all examples? We said three. Ruve Tavshilin is there. It's something which can't count logically. Okay. Briefly, in our Mishnah it says that if somebody would end up on the roof and he would say to him, has it lit up till Chevron? He would say yes. Now, there was three different words, three different short statements. And the question is, who said what? You've got one person on the floor, one person on the roof, and he's having a discussion. Now, let's listen to the words carefully. The whole eastern side is lit up. That's one statement. All the way till Chevron is a second statement. And the person would say yes. Three statements. The eastern side is lit up. Till Chevron, yes. The question is, did the person on the roof say all those three statements? That doesn't make any sense. You can't stand on the roof and say, it's eastern, lit up all the way to the east, yes. Why are you saying yes to yourself? And you can't be the person on the floor saying all three statements because he doesn't even know. So the question is, who said of those three statements?
Middle there is a question.
Oh,
he says it's sunny.
Very good. He says it's lit up.
Yeah,
the one on the floor says all the way till Chevron.
Yes.
Very good. That's one explanation. One goes two explanations how those three statements are split up between the person on the roof and below. The more says like one shot like Ben, that you've got one person on the floor and one person on the roof. One on the roof says it's lit up. The one on the floor says all the way till Chevron. And he says yes. That's the three statements. That's just one way to understand it. But there's another way to understand it. Let's just see the things. Who's the one who says yes indeed? If you say it's the one on the rooftop, he says all the way till Chevron, yes. If you have a dream, you don't interpret it yourself. Who interprets it? Somebody else. You don't have a dream and then interpret it yourself. So he's the one who's making the statement, and then he's explaining it. Something doesn't make any sense. It's a metaphor, simile, or something. That if you're the one standing on the roof saying all the way to Chevron, it's not the one who's going to say yes. You had the dream. Don't start saying yes. Somebody else has to say yes. So the Gemara says, "Elo hachdekoya." So it must be that the one who's saying it is the one standing on the floor. How does he know to be able to say these three statements? That all the way it's lit up to Chevron, yes. You're not there to know. I've got two explanations who said what. The Gemara says two explanations. The one on the bottom and the one on the top. The one on the roof says, it's lit up the whole eastern side. The one on the floor says, like Ben says, all the way to Chevron. Is that true? Yes. So you've got three statements. The first one said by the roof, the second one by the one on the floor, and the third one by the one on the roof. He says lit up all the way to the east. He says all the way to Chevron, and the fourth one says yes. The one at the floor says, has it lit up? That means one on the floor shouts up to the one on the roof, is the eastern side lit? The one on the roof says, yes, it's lit up all the way to Chevron. The one on the bottom says, hen, yes, meaning, yes, indeed, that's what I meant to ask you, is it lit up till Chevron?
Surely the next time.
No, because I say to you, is it lit up? And you say to me, yeah, till Chevron. That means you're giving me a measure of how lit up it is. And I say, yes, indeed, that's what I meant to ask you. I didn't mean to say is there a flicker of light. I didn't mean to say is it broad daylight. I meant, is it lit up till Chevron? That's the two ways to understand the three cryptic statements that are said, who says what. Either it goes first the person on the roof, then the person on the floor, then the person on the roof, or first person on the floor, then the person on the roof, and then the person on the floor. Yes. Why did they need it? Why did they need to somebody on the roof? Because once it got mixed up between moonlight and sunlight. Does get mixed up. You can't compare the sunlight to moonlight. Moonlight goes up like a stick. When the sun rises, it's spread over a much, much bigger area. If you look at night, when the sun rises, you see the light comes up from many, many places. When the moon comes up, you only get light in one area. So everybody can tell the difference between moonlight and sunlight. So how can it be? Answers the Gemara. It was a cloudy day. When it's a very cloudy day, you can't see the sun or the moon. So all you can see is light coming from behind the clouds. And that's why they couldn't tell if it was sunlight or moonlight, and they made the mistake. A day of sun with cloud, everywhere it's warm. I felt the whole day today, I said to myself, today was quite a humid day. There was clouds, but it was quite warm. Says Rav Papa, on a day like today, did you feel it? Any of you feel it? I don't know. I said to my children a few times, today was not Shabbos. Shabbos it rained. Today was warm. Yes, and then it is hotter than a non-cloudy day which is sunny. That's what Papa is saying. A day which is sunny, which has clouds, is even warmer than a day which has no clouds. Why? Because since the sun, when it's got no clouds, the sun goes here and heats up there. But when there's clouds, the sun spreads everywhere. Like we just said, you can't tell if it's sunlight and moonlight. Today was a day which was warm, and here it's not air conditioning. If you go outside, it was a day of sunlight. Who cares if a day which has got a humid day is warm? He also says the shtuche oiros. It's a good day to spread out your skins to dry out. You're not allowed to knead your dough for matzah in a warm place. So on a day which is humid, you cannot have any windows in the room at all, because any access to any light. That means normally we say don't make the matzah dough in sunlight, but in a place where there's no sunlight, you're okay. On a day which is humid, you have no windows in your room at all. And nowadays, if you go to a matzah bakery, you'll see there's no windows in the room at all. Why? Because maybe over a humid day. So you only use natural. It might be a humid day, and then it's warm everywhere. Says the Gemara, the heat of the sun of a cloudy day is particularly hard. A proof of it, a barrel of vinegar. If you got a barrel of vinegar, if it's completely open, the smell spreads everywhere. If you leave it closed and you open one small hole, the smell shoots out. That's what Rashi says. Similarly, when the sun's blocked by clouds and then the sun gets in somewhere, it's particularly heavy. Shaviri de Shimsha, where the sun goes through cracks of between the clouds. Over here was when the sun rays spread. Here is with the sunlight directly. Kosher Shimsha is worse than the sun. The Simonech Dilfa. If you go into a shower, it's not so bad. You can enjoy a shower. If you go to a place where you have a drip of water falling on you on your head every few seconds, you go mad. It seems that the Russians used to use it as a torture. A drop of the water. Why? When you shower, you can stand for an hour. My children can get a shower, they never come out. They forget about it. Everybody's knocking and shouting, it's my turn next, showers, etc. The Beis, what happens is, but if you've got a drop, it's no good. Why? So Moses says it's like the sun, that if you've got the sun spreading everywhere, it's okay, but the tiny ray of sun is very bad. We'll do one more. Top of Tessa, we'll finish with this thought-provoking thought. Thinking about the Avera, kosher Avera is worse than doing an Avera. Sometimes the smell of meat can make you feel much weaker and much more desiring than the eating the meat itself. Rashi explains, that a person who thinks about the Avera weakens himself more than somebody does in the Avera. But Rashi, and I saw many people bring it, but so I have to have Rashi in front of me today, but I saw many people say it means a complete different word. It means for Nefesh HaChaim. It's a very scary thought. That a person has a body and he has a mind. The mind is a much more important part of the body. He brings from the Nefesh HaChaim, it's like you've got different ministers. You've got like a lowly minister and a very high up minister. If a lowly minister does something disrespectful, it's not so bad. The highest minister goes against the king, it's the worst thing possible. When the person does not avera with his body, it's bad. But the person does not avera in his mind, it's even worse. We're up to Chavtes Amud Aleph, second line. Oh, let's have a quick l'chaim. I forgot.